innovating on or user experience driving everything is, I think, where I start from. It's the beginning and the end for me. For me, it was always, I'm fascinated by technology and love programming, and I love all the, tinkering with the latest framework and all that sort of thing. But in the end, I'm here. It's a means to an end. It's a way to make someone's life better with your product. And even if that is, just a little home cooked app that you've made for your family that does some small thing that helps them, or whether it's a huge, large scale product that you have millions or of users and customers paying a lot of money and whatever, in every case, it should be that you've made something that helps people. And ultimately, that someone has an experience, and that's the user experience.
Hey, Luca here. Welcome to a new episode of the Refactoring Podcast, where every 2 weeks we interview a world-class tech leader. Today's guest is Adam Wiggins. Adam is the general manager of platform at the browser company and co-founder of Heroku. With Adam, we talked about innovating user experience in software and AI. We discussed what local-first software means, and we explored the future of developer tools. So let's dive right into the action after a short word from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by WorkOS. If you're building a SaaS app, at some point your customers will start asking for enterprise features like SAML authentication, scheme provisioning, and fine-grained authorization. That's where WorkOS comes in, making it fast and painless to add enterprise features to your app. Their APIs are easy to understand, so you can ship quickly and get back to building other features. WorkOS also provides a free user management solution called AuthKit, a complete out-of-the-box user management system that's free for the first million users. It's a drop-in replacement for Auth0 and comes standard with useful features like domain verification, role-based access control, bot protection, and MFA. It's powered by Radix components, which means zero compromises in design. You get limitless customizations as well as modular templates designed for quick integrations. Today, hundreds of the fastest growing startups are powered by WorkOS, including ones you probably know, like Cursor, Vercel, and Perplexity. So check it out at workos.com to learn more. That's workos.com. Hi, Adam. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here with us today.
Hi, Luca. Thanks for having me.
So, Adam, you are the co-founder of Heroku, the extremely famous hosting service, which basically invented the platform as a service category. Also very influential for me personally, because I started my startup about 10 years ago with Ruby on Rails. So I hosted everything on Heroku, and basically it taught me about what good developer experience looked like. And today you are GM of platform at the browser company, which is a very recent thing. I mean, you have announced this after we scheduled the interview, then I had to change everything I wanted to ask you, but it's all very exciting. So thank you again for coming on the show.
That's very flattering. Thanks for thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah. So, and also in between Heroku and the browser company, you've done so many interesting things with Ink and Switch, with Muse. So I really don't know where to start. So to break the ice, can you tell me more about your journey? How do you even think about it? And what are the things you're the most proud of?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I've tried to devote my career at least to what I usually call making computers better, by how I view what computing can do for humans, that they're, to me, incredible tools for creativity, for productivity. I'm that rare and weird person who gets excited by things like spreadsheets and email and document editors, and have devoted my career to that. I actually started in video games, which of course is the sort of thing I think that younger people see as a very sexy place to be. And indeed, it's an exciting industry. But I discovered once I was inside it that I actually didn't like the day-to-day of what I was working on. And once I found my way towards more kind of business productivity software, I had found my home, and had done a few bootstrap businesses of varying levels of success, but including some that at least gave me a taste for what it can be like to make a great product that customers like and sell it for a fair price. And eventually that path led to Silicon Valley in 2007, which is when we started Heroku and joined Y Combinator and really discovered my love for dev tools. And yeah, I think we either invented or at least popularized the term developer experience. And it was a great chance to bring a product and user experience mindset to this
Yeah.
world of things like command line tools and libraries and hosting that traditionally didn't have much of a design or user experience
Yeah.
ethos to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think the term developer experience was even a thing uh, back then or before that. And I think one of the merits is not just that Heroku was simple to use or easy to use, is that I think it educated your taste about what good developer experience, what a good workflow had to look like. Aside from the simplicity, I mean, the fact that there were a lot of things that you did not have to care about ideally if the tooling was good. And I think that was what actually changed how many people thought about the whole platform space and developer experience space.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's what a good product does for you, or a good tool does for you generally, which is the decisions you make are the ones that matter, and the
Yeah.
things that don't matter can be abstracted away. And that's true for a bank, it's true for a car, it's true for uh, a document editor, and I think it's also true for a developer tool. But maybe we hadn't thought about
Yeah.
it that way historically, and what things should be abstracted away and what shouldn't. One of our controversial ideas at the time was servers and kind of systems administration and SSHing into your machine and all that kind of stuff was in that category of things that could and should be abstracted away, and that there's other things that app developers uh, should be doing with their time. But you can debate where those where those abstractions should be, and maybe there isn't a one size fits all solution. But thinking about that is, to me, the key or one of the keys of good product thinking.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the ways that the whole conversation shifted is that now there is a lot more attention on cognitive load, on reducing what developers had to, fit in their head in their job, and only taking care of what really matters. While before there was this notion that all these technicalities were really part of the job, and there was not much focus on reducing that, probably.
That's right. Yeah, and then after Heroku went on to found a industrial research lab called Ink and Switch. That was with a lot of the same folks that worked on Heroku with, and we kind of went in a more research direction to kind of explore big ideas around human computer interaction and knowledge tools and so on. Got into tools for thought, helped seed the local first space, and in general just kind of explored the idea of, again, how computing can be better for productive and creative uses. And I consider developer tools and programming to be a huge category under that umbrella of ways to be creative and productive with computers, but not the only way necessarily. And from
Yeah,
there, went on to work on Muse, which was infinite canvas for thinking, and then landed where I am today at the browser company.
Yeah, so I actually was a user of Muse, and I can tell you this story because when I was thinking of starting the newsletter, which I'm working on full time today, but back then I still had a job on top of that. So the newsletter was just in my thoughts, and then it was a side gig at first. I had this big canvas on Muse with all the resources and inspirations of other newsletters that people who had made it, quote unquote, that had turned into full time newsletter writers. So I remember myself during lockdown in 2020, like in my kitchen on my iPad, on the Muse canvas, browsing things. And it was very cool. And in a way, I think there is a common thread that is with your work at Heroku. That is, there were both products that innovated UX in their space. Like they changed how you were thinking about that kind of tool and the experience that you had as a user. And I can't help but thinking that now at the browser company, also thinking at the recent announcements of the new browser. I mean, it's still again another product that focuses on changing the user experience of how people do things that have been doing for a very long time, but try to do things differently. So I'm thinking, is that your things? Is that what excites you the most about software?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, innovating on or user experience driving everything is, I think, where I start from. It's the beginning and the end for me.
Yes.
And sometimes I think folks who come from a technical background, obviously was kind of mainly a kind of what they would call an individual contributor software engineer for a long, long time, even at Heroku as a CTO, and just kind of building the things in code a lot. And you think, okay, user experience makes you think more of designers, product people, that sort of thing, that engineers tend to focus on the technology. For me, it was always like, I'm fascinated by technology and love programming, and I love all the, tinkering with the latest framework and all that sort of thing. But in the end, I'm here. It's a means to an end. It's a way to make someone's life better with your product. And even if that is, just a little home cooked app that you've made for your family that does some small thing that helps them, or whether it's a huge, large scale product that you have millions or of users and customers paying a lot of money and whatever. In every case, it should be that you've made something that helps people, and ultimately that someone has an experience, and that's the user experience. And I feel like it's just call it a North Star to guide the work, but to me, it's also just the motivator. I get out of bed to do that, to help someone in some way, and that translates to user experience.
Yeah, I love the answer, and I totally agree, can totally relate. So now you have started this new role as a GM of platform at the browser company, and as I said, this is all very recent. I think you announced this last month or something like that. We had already scheduled the interview, and a couple of weeks ago or last week, I don't remember, I saw the announcement of the new Dia browser, which is in the works, and there was this big call to action for people to join if they want to join the journey. So can you tell us more about it, about your work, if it's not completely secret?
Absolutely. Well, as you said, yeah, I started there less than a month ago, so I'm not exactly the best spokesperson for the company, but I can say, why I joined. Yeah, so for your audience, if they don't know, the browser company is a company whose, as the name implies, mission is to rethink web browsers, right? That basically Chrome, kind of circa 15 years ago, is still the status quo.
Yeah.
That essentially we had a lot of innovations kind of in the early 2000s going forward, and certainly engines and yes, JavaScript and CSS, and that part of the rendering part of it is also a place that I think continues to move forward. But in general, how you interact with the software itself, the user experience, as you would say, hasn't changed much. And so the company started and said, hey, maybe there's a chance to kind of do a more modern take on a web browser with how the internet has changed. And they're a few years old now. Or I guess I get to say we now, which is interesting. We have made a browser called Arc that I think is very beloved and successful. I
Yeah.
myself have been using it for years, especially among kind of Silicon Valley and design and engineering type folks. It has many, many big and small UI innovations that make browsing the web more enjoyable and more productive. And now that kind of the announcement you're referencing there was, and why I joined as well, is they are working on their next product, their next browser, which is something called Dia. And this is a chance to say, okay, in the years that have changed since they started Arc, even now some major changes have happened in terms of technology and the internet, and it's a chance to again rethink things perhaps for a slightly different audience and make another great browser that can, move things forward. So my role is to help out with that a little bit, particularly on the kind of platform infrastructure side of things. And I'm looking forward to doing that, enjoying it already.
Yeah, I mean, best of luck for your new role and for this really exciting work as it looks like. So when you say there is new tech, new things going on that hint at the fact that we can rethink a lot of how the UX works for the browser, not only for the browser, I think you probably refer to AI and everything that we are now able to do with that. So what are you excited about the most today about using AI to change UX for the browser, for developer tools, for what are the opportunities that you see?
Yeah, well, obviously, there's a huge amount of energy and excitement for language models and the wider world of machine learning capabilities, computer vision, and so forth. I do think that, when you talk about the user experience or the UI, user interface portion of it, the starting place on particular language models has been the chat interface.
Yeah.
And I think many people now use ChatGPT or something like it to do things that maybe before you would have done through certainly Google search. There's research. Let me just search the internet for something. But I think there's also the simple reasoning. It feels like having a conversation with
Yes.
the collected knowledge of the internet, and that's just obviously incredibly useful in work and in life. But I also think that there's a lot more. This is kind of a medium or it's technology, but it feels like a medium and a new capability that can be woven in with all the other mediums that we now have built over the years in the computing world, right? Things like touchscreens on the mobile side, things like infinite canvases, like we were exploring with Muse. There's so many. There's version control, and Inkit Switch is doing some experiments in that world of things. So I think there's a lot of different directions to explore. We say, okay, take this medium, the simplest, most I don't know, obvious way to use that medium is this kind of chat back and forth thing. But I think there's much more to unlock there. I can reference a blog post I wrote earlier this year. So I was doing some shorter projects with a series of companies over the course of the year before I settled at the browser company, and worked for a while with a company called Elicit doing a science literature search tool. And they have an approach that I think is quite unique. That's looks like a spreadsheet, but is essentially populating with data extractions coming from language models. And there's it's a whole interesting parallelization technical problem. But on the user experience side, you have a particular a type of user who's not necessarily hyper technical or anything like that, but it's not a chat interface. It's this document that evolves over the time, might be even weeks or months, populated by but not only language model results, but sort of the human curator sitting there. So maybe link that in the show notes or something like that. There, I talk about the AI UX opportunity there, and that's like one example of like here's a thing that is not chat. And again, it's not about being not chat, but more that like I think there is probably a pretty big frontier or a pretty big place to explore in terms of how can we use this new medium in a wide variety of user experience and UI kind of settings.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that the modes of interaction and the UX that we can figure out around these capabilities are what really matters. Because I mean, if you think about it, as a matter of fact, the great breakthrough came with ChatGPT, which was a way of changing, the UX of these models that were already out there. There was this dashboard, there were APIs from OpenAI, but they were not available like in this easy chat form. And at some point, someone figured out the chat UX is a good way of taking advantage of this knowledge of these models, and that UX shift changed everything. So my guess is that we can probably find other things like that, these other of these kinds of breakthroughs, probably even without needing more powerful models or waiting for GPT-5 or like stuff like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think in general, this is something you see, or I think it's a pattern you see in technology, which is, well, a technology that itself is kind of raw and doesn't really benefit end users in its natural form, something like a language model, and you put that together with something like the chat interface, which ends up being the unlock for that. And I think you can say the same thing for, I don't know, MP3s. The MP3 algorithm was a technology, but it actually took quite a while to bring that to what was, basically Napster was the user experience or the UI that unlocked the real power of what was possible with that and led us to Spotify and so on that we have today. So I think you always have that 1-2 punch of technology plus, actually Heroku is a good example of that, right? Virtualization, like, VPSs and Zen and that realm of things, the early EC2 and these kind of containerized, virtualized systems. That was, I guess there was a user experience to that, but there was a technology there, and it was wrapping it in this kind of platform as a service or serverless thing is what I think allows it to reach its full potential.
Yeah, I think that the parallel with Heroku is very interesting because makes me think, when you started Heroku, you probably had in mind a few things that for you were inefficient and you could remove, from the UX of developers on the day to day. You were thinking developers do not need to take care of all of this. We can simplify. Can you think already at something that if you're able to fix it or to do it better with AI, you can already see that you can unlock potential for users? Thinking of browsing or any other products, are there parts that you're really looking forward to address to make AI more useful than it is today?
Yeah, I'm not sure because the Heroku example, it started from a sense of what you would call pet like pain or even
Yeah.
just annoyance, which is a lot of the things you had to do for deploying or hosting an app, whether it was something like a shared host, which were generally didn't work all that well except for pretty small apps, or racking and stacking your own servers, or managed servers. Just the interface there was just heavyweight and annoying and yeah, just hard to work with, and just like I just didn't want to do it. I didn't like it. And this actually is, this is kind of like an entrepreneurship tip to some extent. If there is a thing that you need to do in your daily life or in your, especially in your work, that is really tedious and annoying, that may be a product opportunity, that taking that away from someone. If many people have that same tedium or that same point of annoyance or friction in their life or work, you can take it away. And I do think most of the AI umbrella stuff we're talking about here is still in the category of it's not a matter of that there's something annoying. It's more like to take away. It's more like the potential of that, right? So
Yeah.
the comparison there again is something more like virtualization or the MP3 algorithm, and probably the creators of that algorithm weren't thinking, let me take away the annoyance of buying CDs. People didn't necessarily think of that as being a pain point or a point of
Yes.
annoyance. But indeed, it was, or you could make things more frictionless. Or it turned out once people could buy, for example, songs as a one-off. Let me just spend 99 cents to buy exactly the song I want rather than the packaged album. People loved that. They really wanted that. That was
Yeah.
that actually took away a pain or a point of friction in engaging with the music that you wanted to purchase that maybe the CD manufacturers hadn't even thought that much about. So yeah, I think AI feels like it's still in that state where it is a technology looking for a problem.
Yeah.
And that first chat interface, let me have the conversation with the internet for the common case of, the equivalent of what I want to go look on Wikipedia or Stack Overflow for. This can do a better job of finding me exactly what I need to know and even introduce some lightweight reasoning to that. That turned out to be the pain that could solve. Or is there other pain that it can solve? Well, certainly we've got an industry who has really started its engines to search far and wide and look for opportunities on that. So obviously, I'm putting my effort into the world of how we browse the internet, and certainly I have a personal laundry list of many ways that moving around on the web, particularly again when you're doing work-related things, can be annoying or have points of friction. And those things I think can be improved. The internet's amazing, of course. The web is amazing, but there's also plenty of points of annoyance. And I think there's a lot of ways to solve those points of annoyance, but there's things we can do now with language models to take effort and work and tedium out of the day of individual people that maybe we couldn't have done before we had the strong language or the powerful language models we do have now.
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree also about seeing this as technology still kind of in search for a problem that is, we already see the potential, we see many applications, but we have probably just scratched the surface of how we can help people with removing annoyances or doing just more and creating a more delightful experience. So looking forward to see what you build. And another topic that is very interesting to me and kind of segues from here, because AI brings a lot of focus and concern also about how data is used, data ownership, how these models and applications relate to that. And one subject that you have addressed that is very interesting to me is this whole idea of local first software. which I've also briefly mentioned before. You created this term a few years ago. Actually, I think it was 2018 now. But from then, it has only grown in popularity. There are many awesome examples. You held the Local First Conf this year. So, first of all, what's your definition of local first software?
Yeah, the way I think we described it in that essay, now 5 years old, was local first is kind of having your cake and eating it too. It's getting the collaborative shareability that we associate with web and cloud apps like Google Docs. I can just send a Google Doc to anyone or click share and type in their email, but also getting back data ownership and user agency. And that, agency and ownership manifests in many ways, but a very kind of simplistic way, or just a kind of an obvious example is, I'm working on my Google Doc. I'm doing that on a train ride, on a plane ride, on something else. I go into a tunnel. I don't have, or the plane takes off. I don't have internet access anymore. Now I can't type in my document anymore. I'm just locked out of it. And in that moment, I realize, oh, this isn't really mine. It's really Google has it, and they're letting me type things into it, which is basically fine because, or has been fine because cloud gives us so many benefits, right? The benefit of typing into Google Docs rather than Microsoft Word doesn't have this problem, or at least the classic desktop installed version doesn't have this problem. But the downside is it's so hard to share. You have to send it as an email attachment or whatever. And so local first asks the question: is it possible? Or actually, let me put it two ways. We came to local first through doing research of asking the question of whether it's possible to get the kind of ownership and privacy and control that you get with kind of local classic files apps, but combine that with the shareability and access it on all my devices, and I can send it to anyone in the world and they can access it, and we're looking at the same thing at the same time. That incredible benefit of cloud. Can you get both of those at the same time? And we did a bunch of research on this, including digging deep into the computer science world with CRDT algorithms and things like that. We felt through our prototypes that it could be done. And then the local first manifesto, if you want to call the original essay, that was putting a name on it and saying, we have shown this can be done, we and others who are working on the research. Here are some principles that we think could come out of this, and these are principles we would want to strive towards. So it's not a description of a technology. It is more of a set of philosophies that we think we could move towards.
Yeah. So I think this is very interesting because when you look at it, it's not just about, it's a concept that has implications that are profound, not just on a UX point of view. It's also about the fact that you are owning your own data, that the data is also portable between different services. So what you're basically advocating for is let's make applications in a way that they can use like underlying layers of sharing data that are already available, through cloud services like Dropbox or iCloud, and share data and synchronize data also this way, instead of having data that is always online and it requires you to be online to access it, and is shared only proprietarily within the same app. So this is what you're advocating for in simple.
Yes. So actually probably my two biggest sources of inspiration in this were, first of all, Dropbox, which I've been a user for. They were in the YC class before us, and I basically got to use a pretty early version of it, and has been part of my personal technical stack for a very long time. And it's so simple what it does, that it just syncs your files. But the files are still there, even if something happens, you go offline or whatever. Like those, I have those files, even though at the same time I know they're safely backed up in the cloud. They sync to my other devices. I can share them easily with other people. But the Dropbox model and iCloud basically has the same problem. Is sort of a technical dead end because you can't really have the real-time Google Docs or Figma style. We're both looking at the same document at the same time. You get these like sync conflicted copies, whatever. So it kind of has this limit that you hit. But another one that I really take inspiration from is Git. Git and GitHub, right? And Git is, it's decentralized revision control, and GitHub can be a central place to collaborate on that. But GitHub being down, or me being not connected to it or whatever, I still have all my software. I still have all my code. If GitHub goes away tomorrow, or Microsoft decides, all your code is belong to us, I feel secure knowing my whole code base is sitting there right on my computer. So that is a good example, and the workflows it creates for collaborating with other developers. It's not a real timey thing, but something where through pull requests and through diffs and all those capabilities of version control, I can collaborate really effectively with other people. So it has the sharing and collaboration, again, very specific to the code side of things, but also has the data ownership. And it's that 1-2 punch that to me is really powerful. And I wonder, okay, Dropbox did it for files, but it's kind of limited in some senses, or kind of a dead end. Git does it very specifically for code. Is there a version of this that would get you the full Google Docs, Figma, real-time experience, but also have some of that ownership? And that led us to the CRDT technologies, which is one good way to implement this, and kind of sync engines and that sort of thing. And then once I experienced many of the other benefits that I hadn't even thought about in terms of particularly around the developer experience of building apps in a local first way, my conviction just kept increasing. And indeed, it's very nice to see that the whole world has perhaps gotten more and more excited about this, and particularly in the last year or so, it feels like it's really hitting some kind of tipping point.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited as well because I remember, I think, reading for the first time your essay many years ago. And then when I started doing research for this interview, I had not realized that this had grown into more of a movement. I saw the conference, and I think this is very relevant, especially again in today where data is more and more important, is even more important. I mean, the fact that AI models thrive on data, and of course they are the more useful, the more data you can supply to them. I read a very interesting essay that basically said that people who have been journaling for years have incredible advantage, at using LLMs because they can supply a lot of themselves, to LLMs. And so, do you think that this theme, not only from the UX perspective, that offline first apps feel better and are better, and we will get there, but the fact that you keep the ownership of your data, the data is more portable, more interoperable, is going to be more and more important?
I think so. Yeah, it's a sort of a happy accident that the rise of AI and language models fits in well with the kind of local first software syncing, data syncing approach, data ownership approach. Yeah, it's both individual ownership, like you said, your own personal notes or whatever, but it's also true for businesses. The extent to which your data becomes kind of is a store of intangible value that may have a lot of value, and you don't necessarily want to just ship that off to an AI provider somewhere. But regardless, that again, this kind of it comes from a pretty ideological place to talk about data ownership and user agency, and that can pretty quickly devolve into kind of a activist privacy thing that for me is not necessarily that helpful of the direction I want to go. But in general, thinking about data as something that's important to yourself as a person and especially as a business, I think is a useful frame, and I think local first fits in pretty nicely with that.
Yeah, and I can't help but thinking this is maybe also a little bit of a critique to the way that web development and app development has evolved, in the last decade, at least, where it's all. I mean, complexity seems to have gotten a little bit worse when it comes to web development. It's all on the client side, single page applications that are tricky from many points from many angles. And recently we had on the podcast David Hennemeyer Hanson, which not only cited Heroku as a very good example of removing or reducing complexity, but also said many things against the current state of web development. So what is your take on this? Are you happy with the current state of things, or you would like apps to be developed differently?
Yeah, well, to me, software and technology generally is just perpetually too complicated. I'm probably a little bit of an odd duck when it comes to people with a software engineering background, because I actually have a pretty low complexity threshold. I can't hold a lot of stuff in my head. I really rely on writing things down, and I don't know. I just can't hold a lot in my head. And the solution, though, is to simplify, to find ways to create, information hierarchies or abstractions that wrap things up in a way that allows you. And again, you went to the Heroku example. I think is kind of an exhibit A, where I was coming from that perspective of like holding all the stuff about how to host the app in my head is very confusing to me when I'm thinking about the functionality of the app and what I want for the end user, and finding good ways to wrap that up basically makes it easier for me to work on it. And so I want to bring that into products as well. But yeah, I'm not sure if I would, though, agree with the point of view that it's getting more complex. I think there's a kind of complexity homeostasis, which is that we make things easier and simpler with better abstractions. I mean, I remember writing C in the 80s and 90s, and memory management was a huge part of what you spent your mental cycles on, and a lot of your crashes and other problems came from memory corruption and things like that. And thanks to like modern protected memory and garbage collected languages and et cetera, 97% of the time developers don't need to worry about that anymore. We've abstracted that away. But every time we add something like that, we also increase complexity by, in many cases, just giving new capabilities, right? That like, of course, it was simpler to write a program for an MS-DOS computer in the 1980s because it could just do way, way less. So your end users expect more of your software. We as developers, I don't know. Now you expect, website should work on mobile and it should work on the desktop. That's pretty much just table stakes. And CSS does a lot with breakpoints and other things to make that relatively reflowing layouts and different kinds of capabilities like that to make it automatic or manageable or something like that. But yeah, of course, there's a lot of complexity to add those features in. So I don't know. I kind of always somehow wish that we could get those simplicity wins, like adding garbage collection language or whatever, and then just be like, okay, but let's not also raise the bar on what people expect from the software, so that then we can just keep it simpler and easier to build software, and then we can iterate more quickly and it will be more fun and we can build more different types of apps. But realistically, I don't think that's how the world works. I think every time we tame the complexity a little bit, then we're just going to like spend that complexity budget on something new.
Yeah, that's probably it's probably like that. Do you think that to go back on the AI topic, this is gonna help with like new generation of tools that help tame this complexity better? Are you looking into something in particular when it comes to developer tools and using AI for something, or it's still very early?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious that it is already the case that language models have massively contributed to how software gets developed. I'm not sure if we measure that in individual developers can do more, so sort of more or better software gets built, or individual software developers can build the same stuff in less time, so they can just basically have to work a little less hard. Certainly, what I'm excited about is more the end user. So one of my interests that we explored a lot in Ink and Switch and was a basis for Heroku is end user programming, which is the idea that at the moment you have the professional kind of cast of software developers who can build applications, and kind of everyone else just needs to use the applications they're given. And I really hope that there will come a day when programming of computers in some simple form is something that's basically everyone can do, even if it's just in a very kind of simple way, doing some automations or building a small app for their own use or whatever. And that is a thing that I hope, or I think that the language models has the potential to greatly help with.
Yeah, it's true. It's very interesting. Absolutely, I think we are seeing the seeds for this, and I think the hope is that for real, we will be able to have software that is more and more bespoke and custom to our needs, and embedded into everything we do in a way that simply hasn't been possible before. I think there is a lot of attention, as you said, in looking into how AI improves productivity, but that's just, I think, the quantitative game, while instead I think that the most impact will come from areas that we have not looked into, even that are will be entirely made possible thanks to the fact that AI is so cheap with respect to the previous way of doing things. So it's not just that we are doing the same things better, we are doing entirely new things that were not possible before. And another thing that I wanted to ask you is, since you were annoyances that you wanted to solve with Heroku, do you have some annoyances now in the developer space that you would like a new Heroku to take up the torch and do better for you?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure if, I guess if you scope new Heroku to, other kinds of kind of runtime environments or developer services like databases or something like that. Certainly there is in the local first realm, and I'm happy to say this fits with the what's happened in the last year or two, that there's quite an explosion there, including lots of services, including hosted services and open source libraries and things like that try to create a layer so that you don't need to build all the infrastructure to make your app local first, but rather you can plug in a sync engine that kind of, you just build your app as if it's local, but then magically it gets kind of synced out to all your collaborators and all your devices. So I think there's a Heroku for local first. I think there's a number of really good contenders there, and I'm excited for that. Yeah, but I'm not necessarily sure that the runtime environment, the hosting space. Not to say that I think what's there is perfect, but it does seem like that's pretty well served. For me, the thing I continue to come back to is usually more around the iteration loop. And I wrote about this a little bit in an essay a couple of years ago about the kind of how the essay was called "Making Computers Better," but there's a section on how we build and develop software, and I talk a little bit about the Heroku piece of things. But to me, it kind of comes back to what's the iteration loop. And so from the moment that I think, okay, I want to, I don't know, think of a trivial UI change, turn this button blue, move it to the right. I want to update the model logic so that it, calculates sales tax in a different way or whatever. From the time of thinking that, and then there's the kind of implementing the code. That's certainly what, language models obviously can help a lot with, as well as powerful IDEs and things like that. But from that point of kind of getting that implemented, and you want to push some button that basically says, and you can call it build or run or deploy, but really what you're saying is, I want to see the result of what I just did. And I almost feel like you can measure, to me, the most important progress in developer experience, or the joy in building apps, for me personally, is the length of time between when I press that button and I see my result. And this is obviously a big part of where Heroku came from, was that, I could develop on my local laptop, but when I want to share it with someone else or see a result on the internet, which in some ways for a website, it has to be on the internet to, be kind of real, so to speak, was pretty long, might be measured in days, weeks, time to get a server set up, whatever. And the idea that, Git push Heroku and that would be live within, 20 seconds or something like that, that makes a very nice, tight iteration loop. And I see this in every space. Like, so for example, Muse was native iOS development, the browser company, obviously is Swift, building for Mac and for Windows and kind of the whole Xcode world of things. But you also see this in web tools, just like I described for Heroku, and sort of like there's the local iteration, and then there's the iteration that I can share with others, and making that loop kind of so fast to get that feedback. And the tighter you can make that loop, I think the better off you are. But again, coming back to that kind of similar to the complexity homeostasis, I think the tools get more powerful, and the computers certainly get more powerful, but then the build systems get more complex, and the CI systems get more complex, and the build artifacts get bigger. And pretty soon you're back to, you push the compile and run button, and you wait for, 3 minutes before you see the result. And by the time it comes up, I kind of forgot what it was I was doing in the first place. And I feel like that's a perpetual issue in the industry. But I dream of days, and this exists in some places, but true live coding where you make a change and you just see it right away. You don't even have to push any button. That to me is always the utopia that I want to bring ourselves towards. So if I was to see a new Heroku, it would be somehow creating that.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that you feel the pain, especially with native applications where you have to compile things. And I've done some development on that side, and with respect to web applications, sometimes times are different, and you break that kind of feedback loop, and the experience is a little bit more painful. But so is your annoyance more on the local feedback loop when you're building something, or on the feedback loop when you have to share it with others? What
I
do you
think
feel?
equally both. I think they're both important, right? Which is, I want to be able to quickly iterate on something. And then maybe, if you're in an office, you call someone over and be like, here, look at this. Oh, no, that's not quite right. Move it to the left, this kind of thing. Maybe do that over screen share or whatever. But then you want to go to something slightly asynchronous, right? Shoot someone a quick Slack message or something and be like, here, check this out. And have it be something they can easily and quickly and reliably look at. One innovation I love here is deploy previews. As far as I know, I think Netlify was the first to do them, but then Vercel also, kind of, I think has helped popularize them, and probably others do it as well. But the idea that, if I push up a code change to share with people, of course you want to see the result. Why wouldn't you? And if you imagine that there's, the other people you're collaborating with are developers who have very actively have set up a build environment. Okay, it's not a huge amount of work for them to kind of, pull your changes and do the build. But when you talk about working with product managers or another team that doesn't have quite, they don't have the same, maybe they're working on a different component. They don't quite have the build environment set up for your thing, and they just want to look at what you've made and try it. That is just, to me, that is a fundamental piece. It has to be collaborative. And so, so I think both are equally interesting. And so something like Netlify style or Vercel style deploy previews is an example of something I love because it absolutely does address that point of annoyance.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think preview environments for many teams single-handedly allowed them to stay off, staging and single shared environments to handle that kind of feedback with PMs, with other coworkers, making things so faster, so easier. So it looks like a simple thing when you look at it right now in 2024, but from a workflow point of view, it changed everything for many people, I think. So we have a call to action for a new Heroku. So if anybody who's listening is up for the challenge, please do. We have Adam's advice on this, which I think you should listen. So thank you, Adam, for this chat. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Very glad to be here. And if now's the right time to do a little plug, the browser company is hiring, including kind of as we're building out the back-end engineering infrastructure side of things. That would be a role that would certainly be working closely with me, but lots of great open positions on the website there. So check it out if that's interesting.
Absolutely, check it out. We will put the link in the show notes. Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this chat valuable, you can subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider giving us a rating or leaving a review, as that really helps other listeners find the show. You can find all past episodes and learn more about the show at refactoring.fm. See you in the next episode.